The Pacific sun rises blood-red over the USS Missouri, anchored in Tokyo Bay. September 2nd, 1945. The war is over. Flags of surrender have been signed. The deck gleams with fresh paint and polished brass, prepared for the historic ceremony that will formally end the greatest conflict humanity has ever known. Admirals and generals stand in crisp uniforms, cameras ready to capture the moment Japan kneels before the Allied powers. But 20 miles to the south, something moves through the morning haze. Lieutenant Commander James Whittaker stands on the bridge of the destroyer USS Callahan, binoculars pressed against his eyes. He's tired. They all are. 4 years of island hopping, kamikaze attacks, and sleepless nights have carved deep lines into faces too young for such exhaustion. The radio crackles with traffic, supply coordinates, weather reports, ceremonial preparations. Everything is routine. Everything is peaceful. Then he sees it. A single aircraft, low over the water, approaching from the southwest. The silhouette is unmistakable even at distance, the distinctive profile of a Mitsubishi A6M0, Japan's legendary fighter. Whittaker's blood freezes. His hand moves instinctively toward the alarm, but he hesitates. The war is over. Surrender has been signed. This must be a mistake, a lost pilot who hasn't received the message, a final remnant of a shattered empire limping home. Bogey, bearing 270, 3 miles out, he calls to the Combat Information Center below. His voice is steady, professional, but his heart hammers against his ribs. The Zero doesn't waver. It flies straight, wings level, landing gear down, the universal signal of peaceful intent. No weapons drop. No evasive maneuvers. Just a steady approach toward the American fleet. On the deck below, Seaman First Class Robert Chun watches the approaching aircraft with a mixture of curiosity and dread. He's Chinese-American, recruited from San Francisco's Chinatown, and he's seen what Japanese aircraft can do. His brother died at Pearl Harbor. His uncle disappeared in the Bataan Death March. The sight of that rising sun painted on the Zero's fuselage makes his stomach turn, even now, even after surrender. The Zero circles once, then again. Radio operators scramble to make contact, cycling through frequencies, broadcasting in English and broken Japanese. Unidentified aircraft, this is the United States Navy. State your intentions. Acknowledge. Nothing but static. Admiral Chester Nimitz, aboard the Missouri preparing for the surrender ceremony, receives the report with a frown. Fighter patrols are scrambled. F-6F Hellcats roar off the deck of the nearby carrier Yorktown, climbing fast to intercept. But they're ordered not to fire unless fired upon. The world is watching. The war is over. One desperate pilot won't be allowed to restart it. The Zero descends to 500 feet, then 300. It's close enough now that Whittaker can see the pilot in the cockpit, a single figure, head turning, scanning the fleet below. The aircraft is pristine, well-maintained, no battle damage visible. This isn't some kamikaze holdout. This is something else. Then, incredibly, impossibly, the Zero's canopy slides open. A small package tumbles out, falling through the morning air, trailing white cloth, a makeshift parachute. It drifts down toward the Callahan, swaying in the breeze. Marines on deck scramble for position, rifles raised, eyes tracking the falling object. Is it a bomb? Some final act of defiance? The package lands on the forward deck with a soft thud. Nobody moves. Whittaker barks orders, "Secure that object. Nobody touch it until we get the bomb squad up here." But before anyone can react, the Zero banks sharply, climbing back into the sky. The Hellcats are closing in, less than a mile away, their pilots tense, fingers hovering over triggers. The Japanese pilot doesn't run, doesn't fight. Instead, the Zero levels out at 2,000 feet, the engine cuts, and the aircraft simply drops. No ejection. No parachute. Just a controlled dive straight into the Pacific Ocean. The splash is small, anticlimactic. By the time the Hellcats reach the spot, there's nothing but debris and an expanding circle of oil on the water. The pilot is gone. The Zero is gone. And on the deck of the Callahan, a waterproof leather pouch sits unopened, stamped with Japanese naval insignia. What nobody knows yet, what won't be discovered for another 3 hours, after the bomb squad clears it, after intelligence officers break the seal, after translators are rushed in to decipher the contents, is that inside that pouch is a handwritten letter from Admiral Matome Ugaki, commander of the 5th Air Fleet, dated September 1, 1945. A letter that was never supposed to exist. A message that would be classified top secret within 6 hours of its discovery. A warning about something that hadn't happened yet. And by sunset, every copy would be destroyed, every witness would be sworn to silence, and the official record would show that nothing unusual occurred in Tokyo Bay on the morning of September 2, 1945. The letter arrives in Admiral Nimitz's hands at 0847 hours, just 90 minutes before the scheduled surrender ceremony. Commander Harold Stassen, Nimitz's flag secretary and a future presidential candidate, carries it personally, his face pale beneath his tan. "Sir, you need to read this immediately." Nimitz is surrounded by staff officers, finalizing arrangements for the greatest moment of his career. General Douglas MacArthur will arrive within the hour. Photographers are positioning equipment. The surrender table is being carried onto the Missouri's deck. This is history being staged, choreographed, controlled. He almost waves Stassen away. But something in the younger man's eyes stops him. Nimitz takes the translated document. His aide, Lieutenant Wilson, stands nearby with the original Japanese text and photographs of the letters pages. Insurance, in case anyone questions the translation. The handwriting is elegant, precise, the calligraphy of a cultured officer from the old Imperial Navy. To the Commander of American Naval Forces in Tokyo Bay. I write this knowing I will not survive to see your response. My duty requires that I inform you of plans discussed among certain factions within our military command, plans that have not been sanctioned by His Imperial Majesty or the civilian government that has chosen surrender. There are those who believe that surrender is betrayal, that death is preferable to dishonor. You have seen Kamikaze. You understand the depth of this belief. But what you do not know is that Vice Admiral Takejiro Onishi and elements of the 343rd Naval Air Group have discussed a final operation, an attack during the surrender ceremony itself. Approximately 40 aircraft, hidden in caves near Atsugi and Opama, have been held in reserve. The plan, as I overheard it, is to strike at the moment of maximum symbolic impact when your commanders are gathered on the Missouri. I cannot verify if this plan will be executed. Onishi speaks of honor restored through final sacrifice. Others speak of creating conditions that would force continuation of war, believing that American public opinion could not sustain conflict if senior commanders were killed after official surrender. I am old. I have lost this war. But I am not a murderer. His Majesty has chosen peace. I will not see that choice destroyed by fanatics. The pilot who delivers this message is Lieutenant Nakamura, son of my oldest friend. He volunteers for this mission knowing he cannot return. Your forces will not permit a Japanese aircraft to depart your formation. He accepts this. Do with this information what you will. I go now to join my pilots in final flight against Okinawa. By the time you read this, I will have joined them in death, as a commander should. Admiral Matome Ugaki, 5th Air Fleet. September 1, 1945 inch. Nimitz reads it twice. Then a third time. His face betrays nothing, but his hands tighten on the paper. Who else has seen this? Myself, the translators, 3 Navy Japanese language officers, and Commander Whitaker on the Callahan. I've ordered everyone confined to quarters pending your instructions. The pilot? The Zero pilot. No survivors, sir. He went down with his aircraft. We recovered some wreckage but no body. The ocean here is over 400 feet deep. Nimitz walks to the window of his quarters, looking out over Tokyo Bay. Hundreds of ships. Thousands of men. Reporters from every major newspaper in America. Newsreel cameras. This ceremony will be broadcast to the world. Peace. Victory. The end of the nightmare. Or a massacre. Get me General MacArthur. Immediately. And I want every fighter in the fleet airborne within 20 minutes. I want combat air patrols over every airfield within 100 miles of this bay. And I want them authorized to shoot down anything that flies without explicit clearance. Sir, the Japanese government has ordered all military flights grounded. If we start shooting down aircraft, then we'll apologize later. Move. But even as the orders go out, Nimitz faces an impossible calculation. Ugaki's letter provides no proof, no confirmation. Intelligence reports over the past week have mentioned Vice Admiral Onishi, the father of the kamikaze program, expressing bitterness about surrender. But expressing bitterness isn't the same as planning an attack. Caves near Atsugi could contain aircraft, or they could be empty. Fanatics might exist, or this might be disinformation designed to disrupt the ceremony, to create a diplomatic incident, to give hardliners in Tokyo an excuse to reject surrender terms. And there's another problem. Ugaki himself. Naval intelligence confirms within 30 minutes that Admiral Matomu Ugaki did indeed take off from Okinawa on August 15th, the day of Japan's surrender announcement, leading 11 Yokosuka D-4Y dive bombers on an unauthorized attack against American forces. None of the aircraft returned. No wreckage was definitively identified. Ugaki was declared killed in action. But the letter is dated September 1st, 17 days after Ugaki's supposed death. It's a forgery, Lieutenant Colonel Sidney Mashburn, MacArthur's chief intelligence officer, declares when he arrives with the general's staff. Ugaki is dead. This is a provocation, possibly Soviet, possibly extremist Japanese factions trying to sabotage the surrender. Or, Nimitz counters quietly, Ugaki survived his attack, went into hiding, and decided to prevent others from carrying out what he himself attempted. MacArthur enters the room like a storm front, khaki uniform immaculate, corncob pipe clenched in his teeth. He reads the letter once, then tosses it onto Nimitz's desk. Gentlemen, I will not be intimidated by ghosts and rumors. The ceremony proceeds as scheduled. General, if there's even a chance. There is always a chance, Admiral. There was a chance at Leyte. At Luzon. Every day of this war has been a calculated risk. We do not show fear. We do not postpone victory. The Japanese people need to see their military defeated, their government surrendering, their empire ended. If we delay, if we show uncertainty, we give hope to every fanatic who wants this war to continue. Nimitz knows better than to argue with MacArthur's certainty. But he also knows his responsibility. Then we proceed with maximum defensive measures. I want the Missouri ringed with destroyers. I want anti-aircraft batteries at full readiness. And I want every man on that deck armed and alert. Agreed. But the ceremony goes forward. At 0920 hours, radar stations across the fleet report multiple contacts, aircraft approaching from the west. Fighter patrols scramble. Tension crackles across every radio frequency. Gunners swivel their weapons toward the sky. Then the contacts resolve. American B-29 superfortresses from Saipan, arriving to provide aerial coverage for the ceremony. Scheduled. Expected. Authorized. But in the chaos of the alert, nobody notices 3 radar contacts that appear briefly over Atsugi, then disappear into ground clutter near the mountainous terrain northwest of Tokyo. Low. Fast. Heading toward the bay. The surrender ceremony begins at 0902 hours under slate-gray skies. General MacArthur stands at the table, facing the Japanese delegation led by Foreign Minister Mamoru Shigemitsu and General Yoshijiro Umezu. Cameras click. Newsreel operators turn their cranks. The deck of the Missouri is packed with Allied officers, British, Chinese, Dutch, Australian, American, witnesses to the end of empire. 20,000 feet above, Lieutenant Commander Eugene Valencia leads a division of 4 F-6F Hellcats in a wide patrol pattern. His radio crackles with routine calls, fuel states, position reports, weather observations. The morning is peaceful. Below, the ceremony unfolds like clockwork. Then his wingman's voice cuts through. "Skipper, I've got 3 bogies, low, 10 o'clock, coming out of the clouds over the coast." Valencia banks hard left, eyes scanning. There, barely 500 feet above the water, 3 aircraft racing toward the bay in tight formation. Even at distance, the silhouettes are wrong. Not Allied. Not transport. Fighters. All units, this is Valencia. We have 3 unidentified aircraft inbound to the fleet, bearing 295, speed approximately 280 knots. Moving to intercept. The fleet's combat information centers erupt. Radar operators confirm the contacts. Anti-aircraft batteries traverse, tracking the approaching aircraft. On the Missouri, a junior officer receives the report and sprints toward Nimitz, but the admiral is standing behind MacArthur, visible to cameras, unable to break away without disrupting the ceremony. The 3 aircraft, Kawasaki Ki-61 Tony fighters, designed to look like German Bf-109s, rocket across the bay at wave-top height, using the terrain and low altitude to avoid radar detection until the last possible moment. Their pilots are veterans, men who survived 4 years of war, men who have made a choice that this morning will be their last. Valencia's Hellcats dive, afterburners roaring, but they're too high, too far away. The geometry is wrong. The Japanese fighters will reach the fleet before interception is possible. All ships, weapons free. Engage. Engage. The sky explodes. Every destroyer, cruiser, and battleship in Tokyo Bay opens fire simultaneously. The sound is apocalyptic, a rolling thunder of 5-inch guns, 40mm Bofors, 20mm Oerlikons, creating a wall of steel between the attackers and the Missouri. Tracers arc through the gray morning like meteors. Shell bursts blossom in black flowers across the sky. On the Missouri's deck, MacArthur doesn't flinch. He continues reading the surrender terms, his voice steady, amplified across the bay by loudspeakers. The Japanese delegation stands frozen, their faces masks of horror and shame. Shigemitsu's wooden leg, lost in a bombing years ago, nearly buckles beneath him. The lead Japanese fighter, piloted by Lieutenant Commander Minoru Genda, former architect of the Pearl Harbor attack, thought to be hospitalized with tuberculosis, pulls up sharply, climbing through the anti-aircraft fire with suicidal courage. His aircraft shudders as shell fragments tear through the wings, but he doesn't break off. Doesn't evade. He's committed to a dive bombing run on the Missouri's deck, carrying a single 250-kilogram bomb beneath his fuselage. But Robert Chen, the Chinese-American seaman who watched the Zero arrive hours earlier, is manning a 20mm Oerlikon on the Callahan. He leads the target perfectly, firing in controlled bursts, watching his tracers walk up toward the diving Tony. His hands are steady. His breathing is calm. Everything he's trained for, everything he's survived, comes down to this moment. The Tony catches fire. Genda tries to hold his dive, tries to release his bomb, but the aircraft is dying around him. Flames pour from the engine. Controls go slack. At 800 feet, the bomb releases, but the angle is wrong, the aircraft unstable. The bomb tumbles wide, hitting the water 50 yards from the Missouri and detonating in a massive geyser that rocks nearby destroyers but leaves the ceremony untouched. The Tony cartwheels into the bay, disintegrating on impact. No parachute. No survival. The second fighter, flown by a pilot whose name will never be recorded, takes a direct hit from a 5-inch shell from the destroyer Nicholas. The aircraft simply ceases to exist, replaced by a fireball and falling debris. The third, and this will haunt everyone who sees it, flies straight through the anti-aircraft barrage untouched. Shells explode around it. Tracers chase it. But physics and luck conspire in its favor. The pilot makes no attempt to attack. Instead, he climbing steeply, engine screaming at maximum power, rising through 5,000 feet, then 8,000, then 12,000. Valencia's Hellcats are closing now, 30 seconds from firing range. The pilot could dive back toward the fleet, could attempt one final kamikaze run. Instead, at 14,000 feet, the aircraft rolls inverted and enters a flat spin. Deliberately. Controlled. The aircraft spins down through the clouds like a falling leaf, engine silent, no attempt at recovery. It hits the water 10 miles from the fleet, sinking immediately into deep water. The entire attack lasts 97 seconds. On the Missouri, MacArthur finishes reading the surrender terms. He pauses, looking up as the last echoes of gunfire fade across the bay. Smoke drifts over the water. Debris burns on the surface. And then, without acknowledging what just happened, without breaking character, he gestures toward the table. "General Umezu, you may sign." Cameras capture the moment. The Japanese general approaching the table, picking up the pen with shaking hands, signing the document that ends his nation's war. What the cameras don't capture is the tears streaming down his face, or the whispered apology in Japanese, "Maushuei karimasen," I am inexcusably sorry. The ceremony concludes at 0923 hours. 21 minutes of history. 3 attempted attackers. 2 confirmed kills. 1 mystery. And in Admiral Nimitz's pocket, Ugaki's letter, warning of 40 aircraft, not 3. Either the Admiral's intelligence was wrong, or 37 other pilots chose not to die that morning. The interrogations begin within hours. Every Japanese officer within 100 miles of Tokyo is questioned about knowledge of the attack. Foreign Minister Shigemitsu, humiliated and devastated, personally orders a full investigation. Vice Admiral Takejiro Onishi, the kamikaze architect mentioned in Ugaki's letter, is found in his home near Tokyo on August 16, days before the ceremony, having committed seppuku, ritual suicide. His death poem speaks of apology to fallen pilots and acceptance of defeat. He could not have ordered the September 2 attack. He was already dead. The caves near Atsugi are searched by American Marines. They find aircraft, 19 Zeros, 8 Ki 61 Tonys, and 13 D-4Y dive bombers, all fueled and armed, all hidden beneath camouflage netting. Mechanics are arrested. Pilots are identified. But every single one insists the aircraft were hidden to prevent American capture, not to launch attacks. "We were ordered to preserve them," a young sergeant tells his interrogators through a translator. "For the next war. Not for suicide." The investigation stalls. No written orders are found. No conspiracy is proven. The 3 pilots who attacked the ceremony are identified through wreckage analysis, but their motivation dies with them. Were they rogue fanatics? Part of a larger plan that was abandoned? True believers who acted alone when others lost their nerve? The official U.S. Navy report, filed on September 8, 1945, states, 3 unidentified aircraft of Japanese origin approached the surrender ceremony and were destroyed by anti-aircraft fire. No damage to Allied vessels. No casualties. Incident attributed to isolated resistance by military personnel unaware of surrender terms. Ugaki's letter is never mentioned. The translators who read it are transferred to different posts within a week. Commander Whitaker is promoted and reassigned to Pearl Harbor. The leather pouch is incinerated. The original Japanese letter is destroyed. Lieutenant Wilson, Nimitz's aide who photographed the document, is ordered to destroy the negatives. He does, but not before making one additional print that he hides in his personal effects. That print will surface in 1987, 42 years later, when Wilson's estate is being settled by his daughter. She'll donate it to the National Archives, where historians will debate its authenticity for decades. Handwriting analysts will confirm the calligraphy matches known samples of Admiral Ugaki's writing. But the letter remains classified, and official military histories ignore it. Robert Chen, the gunner who shot down Genda's Tony, receives a Navy Cross for his actions. He returns to San Francisco, works as a grocer in Chinatown for 37 years, and never tells his family about the morning he changed history. When he dies in 1982, his son finds a shoebox in his closet containing a single photograph, Chen standing beside his Oerlikon gun, taken the day after the ceremony. On the back, in faded ink, "I made sure they couldn't hurt anyone else." Valencia, the fighter pilot who led the interception, retires as a captain in 1962. In his unpublished memoirs, he writes, "I've been asked many times if I believe there was a larger conspiracy that morning. The truth is, I don't know. What I do know is that 3 men died trying to prevent peace, and thousands of others, Japanese pilots who could have flown that day, chose to let the war end. History remembers the attack. I remember the ones who stayed home." The real question, the one that haunts every historian who studies September 2, 1945, is about the third pilot, the one who flew through the anti-aircraft fire untouched and then deliberately spun into the ocean without attacking. Was he a coward who lost his nerve? An assassin who realized the futility of his mission? Or something else entirely? In 1973, a Japanese fishing boat working 10 miles south of Tokyo Bay snags its nets on underwater wreckage. Divers investigate and find the remains of a Ki-61 Tony fighter in 400 feet of water. Inside the cockpit, still strapped to the seat, is a skeleton wearing the uniform of an Imperial Japanese Navy pilot. And wrapped in waterproof silk, tucked into the pilot's flight suit, is a letter. It's addressed to his daughter, born 3 months before his death. He tells her about honor and duty, about the weight of choices, about a world he hopes she'll never have to understand. And then, in the final paragraph, he writes, "Admiral Ugaki believed that warning the Americans would prevent needless death. Commander Genda believed that one final attack would restore our honor. I believe only that this war has taken enough lives. I will fly with them, to honor the bonds of brotherhood. But I will not kill. My death will be my protest, against the fanatics who could not accept peace, and against those who would call surrender weakness. I die hoping you will live in a better world than the one we created." The letter is never made public. The Japanese government, embarrassed by evidence of post-surrender resistance, quietly seals it in Defense Ministry archives. The pilot's name, Lieutenant Hiro Tanaka, appears on no memorial, no honor roll, no history book. But his daughter, Akiko Tanaka, becomes a peace activist in the 1980s, working with American veteran groups to build reconciliation between former enemies. She never knows her father's final mission. But she carries his legacy without knowing it, choosing peace over vengeance, understanding over hatred. On September 2, 2025, 80 years after the ceremony, the USS Missouri, now a museum ship in Pearl Harbor, hosts a memorial service. American and Japanese veterans, now in their 90s, stand together on the deck where surrender was signed. They don't talk about the attack. Official histories have buried it beneath layers of classification and deliberate forgetting. But one old man, a former Japanese mechanic who worked in the Atsugi caves, places a small wooden carving on the deck, a Zero fighter, hand-carved, painted with the rising sun. He bows deeply, says nothing, and walks away. A museum curator finds it hours later and adds it to the collection, labeled Unidentified Donation, September 2025. Nobody asks where it came from. Nobody questions its meaning. Some messages, it seems, are delivered not to change history, but to remind us that history is never as simple as victory and defeat. That every war ends with men making impossible choices. That honor and duty can mean different things to different people. And that sometimes the bravest act isn't fighting to the death, It's choosing to let the war end. Admiral Ugaki's letter warned of 40 aircraft. Only 3 flew. 37 pilots made a different choice that morning. Their names are forgotten. Their decision is invisible to history. But because of them, the ceremony concluded. Peace was established. Millions of lives were saved. American, Japanese, Chinese, Korean, Filipino, all the nations that would have bled in a continued war. The message that disappeared from history wasn't about a conspiracy or a battle. It was about a handful of men who decided that enough was enough. And perhaps that's a message worth remembering, even if it was never officially recorded. Especially because it was never officially recorded.